Welcome to the next installment of the Train Vicar. I'm on the Crusaders Express from Rangiora to Christchurch. This is a train that is put on by Pounamu Tourism. It's in carriages that are owned by Mainland Rail, and the railside operation is done by Steam Incorporated. The locomotive is also DC4375, which belongs to Steam Incorporated. And so these organizations work together to put this on together with the Crusaders and Kiwi Rail. And it's a couple of services they're doing in the Greater Christchurch area, specifically to bring people to the Crusader home games at the new Christchurch Stadium. The train actually had a locomotive at each end, and it was DA1431 that led the train from Rangiora most of the way to Christchurch, namely to around Middleton. DC4375 was at the rear. So it's great to travel in a train in the Christchurch area. It's fairly quick from Rangiora into town, and even though they've taken out the Addington curve, it was just a quick stop in Middleton, and now they're heading to the city centre where the Christchurch railway station used to be, and from there people can go to the stadium, which is not too far away. I want to trace the history of these new trains in Canterbury, and I'll start from 2017. Not in Canterbury, but rather in Marlborough on the north of the South Island in Picton. In December 2017, Pounamu Tourism started the Marlborough Flyer, trains that ran from Picton to Seddon. These were steam trains with a steam locomotive and carriages owned by Steam Incorporated being used. The trains took cruise ship passengers from Picton inland to see the countryside. The commercial side was arranged by Pounamu Tourism, the operational side by Steam Incorporated. Steam Incorporated is a railway preservation society based in Paikakariki near Wellington in the North Island. This was initially run mainly by volunteers. Pounamu Tourism is a private commercial company, though its director seems to be somewhat of a railway fan. That business model of running trains for cruise passengers was not sustainable during COVID, as there were no cruise ships arriving in New Zealand. But for some time, travel within New Zealand was possible. So Pounamu Tourism pivoted to the local market and ran steam trains in Marlborough. It also organized the Sir Edmund Hillary Explorer, a tour through the South Island mainly using train travel. Locomotives and carriages of Steam Incorporated were used for this service. From Picton to Kaikoura, the service was hauled by steam engine AB608. In Kaikoura, diesel locomotives DA1431 and DA1410 took over. Here, that's a photo of the two locomotives waiting in Kaikoura for the train which would arrive the next day. Now, the train travelled considerable distances through the South Island, but passengers also went on bus on their tour. The tour was repeated in March 2022, but it was considerably more difficult due to COVID restrictions. Then it was repeated again in April 2023, again with DA1431 and the old Steam Incorporated carriages, which were all still from NZR days. While the train was in the South Island, Steam Incorporated also operated a few trips for locals, in particular the Canterbury Cruiser between Christchurch and Rangiora, and the Alpine Ranger between Christchurch and Arthur's Pass. Well, that was the last Sir Edmund Hillary Explorer train trip run in this way. From then on, Pounamu Tourism used railway passenger service and Dunedin railway services, together with bus travel for those tours. But in January and February 2024, Pounamu Tourism offered the Mountaineer to the public. The Mountaineer, that was a train from Christchurch to Arthur's Pass that ran on a few days of those months. Some of those trains were aimed particularly at cruise passengers, but most were for the general public. Again, locomotives and carriages by Steam Incorporated were used when they were not required in Picton. These trips showed that there were quite a few people in Christchurch wanting to take train trips. Just a note on names. Pounamu refers to the greenstone found in the South Island, and it's also a name associated with the South Island in general. Well, and mainland, in the 19th century, when most Europeans lived in the South Island of New Zealand, it was called the Mainland. Most recent publicity referred to the railway operators as Mainland Rail rather than Pounamu Tourism, so it's more in the public conscience. Pounamu Tourism also became involved with Dunedin Railways, coordinating the cruise ship excursions in Dunedin through the Tyree Gorge. Now, in August 2024, Pounamu Tourism bought carriages from Kiwi Rail. Those were previously used on the capital connection between Palmerston North and Wellington. These carriages needed some work done before they could be used in passenger service, so they were therefore taken to Dunedin. They sat there for some time, and then they were taken to the hillside workshops in Dunedin for repairs. The ownership of these carriages was later transferred to Mainland Rail. It's a subsidiary of the Rail and Tourism Group Holdings Limited, just like Pounamu Tourism, and the holding company is actually family owned. In March 2025, Steam Incorporated used diesel locomotive DC4818, owned and restored by the Glenbrook Vintage Railway, to offer some tours in the South Island. It used its own old red carriages for those trains. In particular, Steam Incorporated offered the Waikari Express, a train from Christchurch to Waikari, travelling also across the Weka Pass Railway. It then offered the Alpine Ranger from Christchurch to Arthur's Pass several times. Both train services were quite well supported. In August 2025, Mainland Rail announced that it had bought the ADL diesel units from Auckland Transport and that it would take them to the South Island. That had to be done quickly because the rail-equipped ferry that linked the North and South Islands would soon be taken out of service. And so the new diesel multiple units arrived in the South Island and were first stored near Seddon and then in Rangiora and Waipara. It was announced that these trains would be used for event expresses around Christchurch. Unfortunately, vandals have damaged the trains and they need major work before they can be used. I'm not sure whether they will run in Christchurch. In late 2025, Pounamu Tourism announced that it would run the Mountaineer again, this time mainly aimed at the cruise ship passenger market. Passengers would board the train at Moorhouse Station in the Ferrymead Heritage Park, as this is close to Lyttelton, the port of Christchurch where cruise ships land. The carriages used for this service were the former Capital Connection carriages, which by now had been upgraded, together with a recently repaired locomotive DC4375. Now, DC4375 is owned by Steam Incorporated, and as far as I can ascertain, the carriages are owned by Mainland Rail. The commercial side of the train is organised by Pounamu Tourism. Steam Incorporated is part of the joint venture responsible for the operational side of train running. On the trips to Arthur's Pass, the locomotive is turned in Arthur's Pass and couples onto the train again for the journey back to Christchurch. This journey enables cruise ship passengers to see the mountain landscape of the South Island from the comfort of a train. It also gives Pounamu tourism a stable income and a base for operations. Pounamu tourism also uses the equipment to offer train travel for locals, particularly to events. In November 2025, it ran the rail train from Christchurch to Kaikoura, to the Kaikoura races there. In March 2026, it ran a train to the North Canterbury Wine and Food Festival at Glenmark, this time using the new carriages. And then in January 2026, it offered the Mainlander train from Christchurch to Invercargill return over 3 to 4 days. More on that train in a future video. The locomotive and carriages are stored at the Fairmead Railway. In this way, Pounamu Tourism uses another heritage rail organisation to enable it to operate its trains. And the latest offering is the Crusaders Express. This train uses the same carriages to bring people to the city centre for rugby matches in the new Christchurch Stadium. It runs from either Rolleston or Rangiora to the city centre. The first train operated on the 24th of April 2026 from Rolleston, when the first rugby game was held at the new stadium. The locomotive at the front of the train was actually a new Kiwi Rail locomotive, DM8064. But I think that locomotive was mainly there that evening to impress politicians. It also was the first time a Class DM locomotive hauled a passenger train. There is no station in central Christchurch. The land where the railway station used to be has been used for commercial premises now. At the site, there's only a small space where passengers can easily reach the street from the railway line. This is across a car park, which apparently is owned by a church. Because there is no platform here, a ramp has to be used to get people on and off the train. Clearly, currently the rugby trains are not very efficient, but the operators make the best use of the infrastructure they have. The trip is also not that cheap, costing $49 for the return trip per adult. So as you can see, there's quite some passenger rail activity around Christchurch these days, and the operators of Mainland Rail have said what they're trying to do is bring back suburban rail in Christchurch and passenger rail in wider Canterbury. And these rugby expresses are really a sort of proof of concept. So let's see where they land with that. For years now, people have been advocating for passenger trains in Canterbury. And we certainly need trains here. But Kiwi Rail, local government or national government have never been that interested really, and they always think it's too hard. But now a private company and rail heritage organisations at least have brought some train services to Canterbury. Now, there have been difficulties in bringing these train services to Canterbury. There are always, it seems, frustrated people who cannot see anything beautiful without having an urge for destruction. Those are both the actual Mandels and those who oppose things in the media and in politics just because they do not like it. But nevertheless, train services have come back, and maybe in the future there can be more. In my videos, I sometimes use railways as an analogy to the kingdom of God. I think it's quite appropriate here too. People have long sought to strengthen God's kingdom here and in other places. And this has been repeatedly frustrated by others who oppose anything beautiful and good. But in some ways, God's kingdom always flourishes. Maybe not in the ways that we have imagined and worked for, but nonetheless it is there.